As attention focuses on Donald Trump's and Hillary Clinton's choice for vice president, it's worth going back in history and trying to understand, at least in modern political history, how relevant the vice presidential choice was to the country and to the likelihood of the presidential candidate getting elected. Let's start with Franklin Roosevelt. He put John Nance Gardner, the Speaker of the House from Texas, on his ticket as vice president, and he would not have been nominated if he didn't. It was an out-and-out deal to get Gardner's votes from Texas and from California and get them to Roosevelt in return for putting him on the ticket. It didn't make a hill of beans of difference in the election or in the administration, and Gardner's career didn't go anywhere, but it was vital to his getting the nomination. In 1948, Harry Truman chose Alben Barkley, the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, as his running mate. It didn't make any difference to anything. In 1952 and 56, Eisenhower picked Nixon for vice president. And that turned out to be crucial in two respects. First of all, it went to the right wing of the Republican Party that had been pushing Taft for president and was bitterly disappointed when Eisenhower defeated him. And Eisenhower used that to appease the conservative wing of the Republican Party, because Nixon was a card-carrying member of that. Now, that could be a precedent for Trump in his efforts to appease the Cruz people and some of the other conservatives who feel he's not conservative enough. And, of course, Nixon went on to be president. It was also important because Eisenhower used Nixon as his hatchet man, going out and attacking the Democrats, so Eisenhower didn't have to. Kennedy chose Lyndon Johnson, a pick that turned out to be totally irrelevant to... Kennedy chose Lyndon Johnson, which turned out to be vital to his carrying the state of Texas, without which he might not have been elected president. And Johnson, of course, then became president. Johnson chose Hubert Humphrey, and Humphrey went on to be the Democratic candidate for president 4 years later. Humphrey was put on the ticket as a sop to the left wing of the Democratic Party that was having trouble adjusting to the idea of a Southerner as the Democratic candidate for president. And when he put Humphrey on the ticket, it reassured them a lot. Nixon in 68 and 72 chose Spiro Agnew, who ultimately had to resign because of a bribery charge, as vice president, and that was helpful in that Agnew went around bashing Nixon's opponents, so Nixon could be a little bit above the fray. Jimmy Carter chose Walter Mondale as his vice president. Not a very important decision, and Mondale ended up running for president and losing badly. In 1980, Ronald Reagan, of course, put Bush on the ticket. And while that had nothing to do with his getting the nomination, Bush was his chief opponent, but he had defeated him in enough primaries to win the nomination without him. It was helpful in sending a signal to the moderates in the Republican Party that he was someone you don't need to be afraid of, and could be a useful precedent for Trump. Bush chose Dan Quayle as his vice president, and that was a disaster. From day one, he was shown to be incapable of really measuring up to the office. At one point, he misspelled the word potato. On a trip to Latin America, he said he was ashamed that he never studied Latin in college. Absolutely a disaster. Clinton chose Gore, which turned out to be a smart move. First of all, Gore almost succeeded him as president. And Gore sent a message to everybody that this was a race about generations. Gore and Clinton were both boomers. They were the same age, mid-40s, running against Bush, who was in his 60s and represented the World War II generation. And by nominating Gore, he made his candidacy kind of a class action for the boomer generation. And of course, Bush chose Cheney, which was important because he ended up dominating the administration and then ended up dominating the foreign policy and becoming probably the most powerful vice president in American history. Obama chose Biden. We're not quite clear yet how important it was. Wasn't at all important in his election or in his securing the nomination. And we'll see what Biden's future is. Thanks for watching.